Welcome to this week's edition of Dugout Dish Podcast. I'm Andy Kirikides, joined by my wonderful co-host, Keith Glasser. Keith, how we doing?
Great. How are you?
Good. We got another wonderful guest on tonight. Going to take a little bit of a different angle here. We're going to go away from the coaching world, and we're going to talk a little bit about admissions, as obviously the academic portion of the recruiting process is very valid and very important. So luckily, Keith has a wonderful connection that he's been able to bring on the podcast. And Keith, I'll kick it over to you for the intro.
Sure. Super excited tonight. Longtime listener. Someone who I've known for, 11, 12 years now. As a lot of people who listen to this know, I worked in admissions for a while when I first started at RPI. And someone who kind of held my hand, for lack of a better term, through the process because I was not good at what I had to do. I've mentioned him before, but tonight we have Nick Rosato, who I affectionately call Coach Rosato. He's not a college baseball coach, but nevertheless, call him Coach Rosato. He's the best. But we have from RPI Admissions tonight, Nick Rosato. Nick, thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good connecting with you again, Keith. Nice meeting you, Andy. As Keith said, we go back a while and have some good stories to tell from some late nights in the basement of the admissions building at good old RPI. So happy to kind of come on and kind of share some information about the admissions world for all you guys looking to go to college for baseball down the road.
Awesome. We're super excited to have you. It's going to be a little bit of a different podcast, obviously, because we're not going to necessarily delve deep into the baseball world, but I think a lot of the things that, we kind of come across and, it'll be relevant in this conversation. So, but before we get going, like we do with everyone else, give our listeners a little bit of a background of where you come from, what you do, and how you got to where you are.
Sure. I'm the Associate Director of Undergraduate Admissions at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, RPI, in Troy, New York. Been there just over 19 years, goes by quickly. But within the world of admissions, lots of different responsibilities, everything from international recruiting to freshman recruiting in upstate New York. But probably one of the aspects most kind of relevant to our conversation today is the athletics liaison between the athletics department, their coaches, their staff, the athletic directors, and our office and undergraduate admissions. So working closely with the coaches on their recruited athletes, helping them through the admissions process during their time there. Kind of a unique aspect of RPI is we're a split division university. So 21 of our 23 sports compete at the Division III level. And two of our sports, men's ice hockey and women's ice hockey, compete at the Division I level. So there's a handful of schools out there that have that kind of split nature within the NCAA world. So I kind of get to work in both realms, both Division I and Division III. But for baseball, we're a Division III school competing in the Liberty League in upstate New York.
Yeah, it's one thing we don't necessarily talk about that much on the podcast, Andy, but it is an interesting. You brought it up, and we'll pull that thread for a second. That it is a little interesting because there are a decent amount of schools that are Division I in one or two sports, and then a Division III in a bunch of others. And I mean, off the top of the head, you have the Liberty League is rife with it. You have Union and Clarkson and us and RIT, even though they're not in the they're not in the ECAC for hockey. I mean, Hopkins is obviously the big one when it comes to lacrosse and things, but there's a lot of schools out there like that. And I always found it interesting that like we always had Division I hockey at RPI where you had there's a lot of really good dudes who played at RPI too. Adam Oates, Hall of Famer, Andy, just for those of you out there that who are hockey fans.
Boston Bruin, baby.
Oh.
Yeah. Two national championships over there.
Joe Juno, I think, played.
Yeah, Joey Juno, yeah.
He was another Boston Bruin.
Yeah. They were on the same team. Yeah. Think about that. You could roll in and watch that back in the day. I'll say this before we get going. I think, this is my hot take for the night so far, I think NHL hockey or hockey live at a high level is one of the best sports to go watch because I think you lose the speed of the game on TV way more than you do a lot of the other sports.
I agree. Yeah, it's also I think it's easier to follow the puck and stuff in person too, just because a little bit easier experience. And also they're just crazy in terms of their toughness and just playing with like broken sternums and broken ankles and all that sort of stuff is
You're on skates just trying to hit people.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried to ice skate, Andy? Are you good at it?
I cannot say I'm good at it. My nephews are both hockey players, and they are both pretty darn good. I get videos of my 6-year-old skating up and down the ice, and the kid can. He's got what I think they refer to it as dangle, which is stick skills. He's got some.
Oh.
He's got a little. He got a little something to him. The
Okay.
8-year-old's pretty good too. My brother-in-law was a college hockey player, so they've been skating, but they'd skate circles around me. If I don't fall down, that's a success.
A little bit of hockey jargon to kick us off.
Hey, reach past
Another kind of interesting college hockey thing is that the recruitment process is very different than any other sport that I can think of in college athletics. Yes. Just because most of them, if not all of them, are playing junior hockey after high school. So most incoming hockey freshmen are 19, 20 years old when they're kind of entering. So it's kind of a unique recruitment process for the hockey world.
And some of them are older too. I think my first year there, Jason Kasdorf was the goalie who he played in the NHL for a little bit, but like I think he was just a little bit younger than I was. And I was like, man, this dude's my age. Yeah. In college sports. Flash forward to post COVID, and everyone
10 years of eligibility. Yeah, you're
15 years of eligibility to play. All right, kick us off tonight. I think the first thing that we'll kind of start with is, one of the things that Andy and I, come across a lot in doing this, and everyone knows, well, I coached for 15 years, Andy coached for 11. We, especially in the high academic world, like you get transcripts and you have a pretty good feel as to whether or not a kid is going to be competitive at the school you're at. And I think one of the biggest questions that we come across with a lot of people is how to kind of set up schedules and transcripts so that they can be competitive in the admissions world. And I think mainly tonight, I think we're going to focus a little bit more on the higher end academic world, because I think it can kind of be assumed that if you're, NocKing down B's and A's, you can probably get into most schools, right? But if we're looking at the higher end academic world, your Ivies, your Patriots, your NESCACs, your RPIs, your U of R's, your RITs, all those schools, like I think people need to hear what you need to do in order to build a schedule that's going to be competitive through that admissions process. And I think starting there is probably the best kind of kickoff point for what we're doing, or what we're going to talk about tonight. So, I think like what kind of insight did you have to start that type of, like what should your transcript look like if you're looking to go to a higher end academic school?
Well, I mean, I think obviously the grades are there, like you said, A, B plus range there. Then beyond that, we're looking at really what we call at RPI the strength of curriculum, right? So a 95 for one student might mean something totally different than a 95 of another student, depending on their classes that they're taking. So at a high-end school, we're really looking for students who challenge themselves academically. So if there's an AP course or their honors course in their high school, making sure that they're taking advantage of those opportunities, challenging themselves. I always like to say, I'm not saying that you have to stay up to 4:00 in the morning because you're taking 9 AP courses your senior year. But if you like math, or you like art, or you like business, or you like architecture or English, kind of challenge yourself in those areas. Take those AP, IB higher levels if they're available, honors courses that are available at your high school to kind of challenge yourself academically. If someone has a 95 average and they've taken 2 or 3 AP courses, they've taken all honors courses, another student has a 95 average, but are just taking kind of lower level courses or just kind of the minimum to kind of get through to meet your high school graduation requirements. There's a big difference between the 95 of student A versus the 95 of student B. At our higher end school, the first initial thing is obviously the kind of the grades, the ABs. I know when Coach Glassier would go to showcases and things like that, working at a place at RPI, he could kind of draw a line at the GPA somewhere in there and kind of X off students below a certain GPA level. But even the ones above his kind of GPA cutoff, you'd probably have to do a little bit of a deeper dive into them. Places like RPI, depending on your major, have different requirements. So all of our students coming into RPI, for example, have to have at least pre-calculus on the math side of things. If you're coming to RPI for engineering or sciences, you have to have physics, chemistry, biology. If you're going to a school for architecture, art, there might be certain art level courses that you have to take or certain portfolios you have to submit at the application process. So it's really important to kind of identify kind of what potential majors, what potential schools you might be interested in, so you can kind of look at their individual requirements, because not every school, unfortunately, has the same requirements. Not every major within every school has the same kind of academic requirements. So just kind of checking those out, making sure that you're going to meet at least the minimum requirements for the institution. Hopefully you can go a little bit above and beyond those with your required courses.
The other thing we run into is we'll see GPAs get inflated a little bit by some courses that may not factor in to what you guys are actually evaluating from an academic perspective. Whether it's, you see like driver's ed or physical education. There's even some other kind of less prominent courses that may not factor in. Can you talk a little bit about how you weigh the core courses, kind of the ones that you mentioned, the sciences, the math, the English, versus some of the courses that may not necessarily fit into that category quite as well, and help differentiate? Because I think one of the things, like I said, we'll see somebody that's got a 3.9, but then you strip out some of kind of the easy A's and all of a sudden it's a 3.4, and that high level GPA may not be representative of your actual academic accomplishments.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of schools out there that recalculate GPAs. So they're looking at the entire transcript, and they're kind of picking and choosing the kind of core classes within the 4 years of students in high school, and actually recalculating a GPA based on the English, the math, the science, the history, kind of humanities type courses. Maybe not including that physical education, or maybe not including that culinary arts or technology class that might be part of the student's transcript. So as you said, someone with a 3.9 can now have a recalculated GPA of a 3.2, which is a big difference kind of in the admissions world when you're kind of comparing yourself to other students. Places like RPI, we're STEM focused. We're paying particularly attention to their math and science grades. So yes, we want students to do well in the Englishes and the humanities and social sciences. But if a student is getting all A's in humanities courses, and C's in the math and science areas, they may not be the right fit for RPI. And really the admissions process is finding that right fit. We in the admissions world want to make sure that the students that we're accepting, that we're enrolling at our school, are going to be successful here. Someone with a C in calculus or C in pre-calculus or C in algebra at high school is probably not going to be successful in computer science or mechanical engineering at RPI. That's the last thing that we want to see. We don't want to see people spend thousands or tens of thousands of dollars for their first semester at RPI or their first or second semester at RPI, and then get asked to leave because they weren't academically successful or prepared. And honestly, as you guys can attest to, that's the last thing the coaches want to see as well. It's hard enough to play baseball at the collegiate level, whether it's Division I, Division III, community college, without this kind of pressure of being overwhelmed academically. Being overwhelmed academically hurts you mentally, hurts you socially, hurts you athletically, and really hurts you as an individual overall. So we were really looking to make sure that students that we're accepting, we feel can be successful academically and be a good contributor to our campus and to the athletic world if they are a varsity recruit.
I think one of the biggest things you're dead on, because I always took because I worked there, I knew what would likely be successful. But I think if you're being the vast majority of coaches, I will say, if they don't think that you're going to be able to do it academically, they're going to tell you fairly early in the recruiting process of hey man, I don't think you're going to be able to get admitted here. And sometimes it is sometimes you have to go to admissions to have that conversation. But other times I think, like, I said at the top of the show, you have a pretty good feel of what it looks like. If I got a transcript when I was at RPI and like I saw a bunch of C's and D's in math and science, and you want to be a civil engineer, like the likelihood of you being admitted is extremely low. And I think like it comes with, from a coaching standpoint too, it comes from like, even if that kid gets in, like he's not going to succeed. He's going to struggle. You're going to have to hold his hand. He's going to be in study hall. You're going to be finding tutoring. He's probably going to have a horrible GPA where you're not going to be able to travel him and do all these things. And you're actually putting that kid in a far more detrimental spot than letting him go somewhere else. Because no matter how good he is, the likelihood of him being able to succeed and stay on the field is going to be slim. And I think, one thing from an admission standpoint and academic standpoint that I'll speak to here before we get into more stuff is, especially at the Division I level, and Andy, you and I haven't really covered this before, and I guess this is the great part to talk about it. Like at the Division I level, there is a GPA minimum that you have to meet from an NCAA standpoint, and then the schools can set a higher one should they choose to for you to be academically eligible. So there's that piece to it. At the division, I'm not clear on the Division II rules. I only spent a year there, and it's probably changed since. But at the Division III level, there is no minimum, but the schools can choose to set a minimum, right? So like I know at RPI, when I was there, like we didn't have a minimum. It was up to each and every individual program to decide what was the correct GPA and how you kind of handle that. And I know like for me specifically, like I had a GPA minimum. If you didn't meet it, like you couldn't go to Florida and do all the things that you wanted to do because you weren't taking care of what you could do off the field. I know where my wife works, there is a minimum GPA that you have to meet to stay eligible. So there is that component to it as well when you're being recruited and going through this process that, yeah, you might really want to go to RPI, but when I was there, and I know I'm assuming Coach Falcon does the same thing now, and I would be willing to bet to say that he does. They look at these transcripts and it's like, yeah, I'm not going to be able to get this kid in. And even if I did like, I don't know if the juice is going to be worth the squeeze because we're going to put this kid in a spot where he's like, he could be kicked out of school after 3 semesters. And what are we doing there? So I think that like, that's a huge piece of this that I think the veil is pulled back completely, or is completely drawn, on this process from a recruiting standpoint. Like sometimes it's an easy way to hide behind not wanting to kind of take a player that, really wants to go to a school. But, more often than not, I would probably say 95, if not more % of the time, if you were being told you're not going to be able to get into that school, there's like, you're not like, you legitimately probably cannot get into that school. And it's better for you to know early on so that you can readjust and find a place that you're going to be able to thrive academically. Because to your point, the school doesn't want it, admissions doesn't want it, and the athletic department doesn't want it. So nobody, and it's not to say they don't want you as a person. It's like they don't want to be like, they're going to feel guilty having accepted somebody who then really struggles and gets kicked out of school. And that's not something anyone really wants in this process.
Yeah, and I think you bring up like the importance of the kind of relationships between the admissions office and the athletics and really the coaches. That's what I try to build a relationship with the coaches, particularly the new coaches, just kind of educating them about kind of what we look for at RPI academically. RPI, other schools in our kind of boat might be similar academic institutions, but might look for things totally different academically. So kind of really training the coaches on kind of what to look for during the recruitment process. Coaches don't want to be wasting their time recruiting someone, making relationships with families, making relationship with prospective student athletes, bringing them along, and then all of a sudden the admissions office saying, no, you're not admitted. I, as an admissions counselor, don't want that either. I don't want a student who's committing to RPI, kind of brushing off all their other options that are there available to them, both academically and athletically, and then at the last minute saying no, and now they're trying to scramble to find an open spot or an open college, or maybe going to community college for a year to kind of regroup. But I don't want that situation to come up come up either. So I think every university has a little bit different relationship between their coaches and athletics and the admissions office. But I think the most successful ones are the ones that have good communication. Coach Glasser could bring me a transcript of a kid who might be on that kind of borderline. And we'll actually take a look and kind of say, yeah, this is someone that we could work with. We feel he's an add to our campus and could be successful academically. Or I might have to say, no, unfortunately, he's not going to cut the mustard. And the coach might be upset, right? It might be a really talented baseball player or football player or hockey player. But in the long run, just having that kind of open communication as early as possible in the cycle, I think is beneficial for both or for everyone involved, the coaches, the student athletes, their families, the admissions office, the university as a whole.
Yeah, I can definitely speak to the kind of bumping up to the GPA limitations at the Division I level. It's the last thing you want as a coach because it's another piece. It's another stressor for you as a coach that you have to worry about a kid. At William and Mary, obviously super high-end academic school. That was something we were aware of when we went through the process is like there's a difference between I can get you in and are you going to get here and I'm not going to be able to get the most out of you because the rest of your life is so stressful to be able to get. And we had a lot of resources at our fingertips with academic liaisons and tutors, study halls. Like there was a lot of stuff put in place, like there is in a lot of schools where you can set these kids up for success, but the stress of not that it should be easy, but if you get to a school and it is really hard for you to cut the mustard, you're not going to get the most out of that kid on the field. You're not going to get the most out of that kid in the weight room. You're not going to get the most out of that kid from a personal perspective because there's going to be so much stress in them having to exert so much energy just to be slightly above what they need to be eligible. And that's a tough place to be in at certain schools where the expectation on campus is really high from an academic perspective, or the course load or the curriculum that they put forth is meant to be very difficult, that was the case of William and Mary. And, for guys who are going through this process, who are in the high academic world, that's something you need to take into consideration and the type of school that you're looking at, not only the ones that you're applying to, but you got to understand, one, it's a super competitive process. I mean, I'm assuming you guys get applications from all over the country. There's no shortage of really smart STEM students that are interested in a school like RPI. But the other part of it is you want to be in an environment where you have a chance to be successful. And kind of circling back to Keith, what you were talking about is you want the kid that you admit to do really well on campus. You don't want it to be a struggle. And I can say, having been at William and Mary, that's something we were definitely cognizant of. And the guys who were on the lower end of the GPA scale, we generally didn't get to see the best version of them on the baseball field because there was so much stress put on them from an academic perspective.
Yeah, I think the other thing too, I just thought about this as you were talking. When you're talking about the high end academic world too, like yes, there's like worked in our admissions at RPI. You could look at the roster I recruited. There's a ton of guys from all over the country. But the other portion, and Nick does this as part of his job there, or at least used to, like you're competing against the world too. There's a lot of international students who are looking to go to RPI, a U of R, an Ivy League school, a Patriot school, a NESCAC. Like your grades have to yes, they have to be really good where you're from, but they have to match up and be competitive against a lot of other people, not only in the United States of America, but the world as well. And I think sometimes that's the baseball piece can be, I don't want to say an angle. It can be obviously it helps, right? To be recruited and be good athletically, to be able to kind of open the door is probably the best way to say for you to potentially be admitted there. But you still have to have the grades because they're going to look at it and be like, well, he's a 91 and we have, 95% of the people who are going to apply here have a 95 and above. So what are we doing here? And I think that's a reality that people don't necessarily know unless you've lived in that world for as long as we have collectively here on the admission side and the baseball side, and I think that's Now, I'm not saying that that's going to ultimately lead to you not being admitted into the school, but that is a reality that it is at play in the admissions world.
Yeah, I mean, having a coach is like having someone in your corner, right? In the admissions process, just like maybe having the director of the orchestra on campus might be someone in someone's corner because they play the piano great or the flute great, or dean of architecture is in your corner because they saw your portfolio and they really want you admitted because you have great artistic skills. But even if you have great artistic skills and you have C's and D's in your art classes, your math classes, your science classes, you're more than likely still not going to get admitted to that institution. So it's really about having as many people as you can kind of in your corner, kind of pulling for you, can certainly help you with that kind of application and admissions process.
Keith, I know you wanted to hit on one particular topic around early decision, so I'm gonna let you fire that question.
Oh, I thought you were going to say something. That's why I paused awkwardly for a couple seconds.
No, I know you wanted that one.
Yeah, I think one of the things, we talked about it on the pre-show, but I think one of the things that we run into with a lot of the clients that we work with and just generally, when I worked in admissions and this, but if we could, let's break down some of the admissions deadlines when it comes to and for a couple different reasons. One, I think there's a stigma around early decision, whether it's early decision 1 or 2, the difference between early decision, early action, and then regular decision. And I think in part, we have a lot of people that we work with who, and even, I'm not old and none of us are that old, but I applied pen and paper and mailed it in.
Yeah.
And got told through the mail whether or not I was admitted, which that doesn't happen anymore. You can you fill out your application online, and whether it's the Common App or the Coalition app, all those things, and your guidance counselor gets kicked to them, they upload everything, and then you find out in your student portal on the internet whether or not you've been admitted. And I think especially for some parents who this is their first kid that's going through college, or maybe it's their second one, whatever it is, but it's their first one with an athlete. And all of a sudden, they hear, and rightfully so, a lot of Division III schools will push people towards early decision because you're locked up, you have everything, but there are benefits to it. And I think that early decision has a stigma around it of oh my gosh, it's early decision, and what do I do? And, there's a lot of kind of misinformation out there about it. And I think if we could work through some of that stuff to get the info out, I think we'll be in a really good spot.
Yeah. Yeah, talking about paper applications, when I started at RPI 18, 19 years ago, we used to get buckets and buckets and literally full mail trucks every day of high school transcripts and letters of recommendation. Thousands of envelopes will be opened and materials scanned in and all sorts of crazy stuff. Now we're lucky if we get a couple of things in the mail every day because everything's kind of automated. But we're kind of breaking it down. So kind of a couple different kind of application processes that exist out there. Early decision, early action, regular decision. Early decision is what they call binding. So you're applying one school, early decision, they're your number one choice. You apply to that school, you're accepted to that school, you're expected to attend that school. It is kind of a good faith effort, right? It's a good faith by the student applying and also by the university that is accepting them, that they can kind of make it an affordable option for them to attend. Early decision is not there for someone who wants to shop schools. So maybe you and your family want to apply to 6 different schools and see you like all 6 schools. You kind of want to see where you get the financial aid package. I wouldn't go that route, early decision, if that's the kind of mindset that you have. But early decision, we hope to make it as affordable as possible for a student to attend. A lot of schools, you can work one-on-one with financial aid officers, with the financial aid office. If you get that initial financial aid package, it's not doable for you and your family. I always like to say, as long as you and your family kind of put a good faith effort into working with the admission staff, working with the financial aid staff, if in the end, it's honestly not going to be financially viable for you and your family, we're not going to ask you to sell your house or your car for you to attend a particular institution. So you can get asked to be released from the early decision agreement. It's not that common. Some schools hold you to the fire a little bit more than others. But again, it's a good faith effort, kind of on kind of both ends. But again, early decision, you're applying to one school, you're not applying to multiple schools. Early decision, you can be applying to a school early decision, and then also have other schools that you're applying to regular decision, right? Because if you apply to school early decision, you're not accepted. You want to have other options out there to kind of get accepted into those schools. Some schools will have a couple different rounds of early decision. So they'll have early decision 1, early decision 2. Usually early decision 1 is due beginning of November sometime around there, and you'll probably find out a month later of your decision. Early decision round 2 can be December, January timeframe, and you'll find out the next month of your decision. There's not much of a difference between early decision 1 and early decision 2. It's really just kind of when you're applying and when you're kind of in that cycle during that time. Some selective schools do have a much higher acceptance rate for early decision students. Some of the really selective schools might fill 50%, 60, 70% of their class with early decision applicants. So those numbers are usually published online, or you can kind of find them out. But some schools, there is a really big advantage in terms of admissions by applying early decision 1 or kind of early decision 2. Other schools will have benefits of applying early decision. This is kind of a newer phenomenon within the last 5 years or so. Before about 5 years or so, schools couldn't really incentivize students applying early decision, but that kind of changed during that period. Some schools offer additional scholarship money to early decision applicants. I've seen schools offer things like free parking passes to early decision applicants, or first choice of your residential halls and where you want to live on campus. There's some schools who will meet your full financial need if you apply early decision. So kind of whatever the FAFSA tells you that your family can afford, they'll meet that need. Whereas regular decision applicants, they're not able sometimes to kind of meet that need. So there definitely can be some benefits to the early decisions process. Something great conversation to have with the coach, with the financial aid office, with the admissions officers are at the different schools. I sometimes feel like students, recruited athletes are sometimes hesitant or afraid to kind of make the connection with the admissions counselor or financial aid office. But please reach out to the admissions office, reach out to the financial aid office to kind of get those questions answered so you can kind of make an informed decision if you do want to go the early decision route. A lot of schools also offer early action, which in a lot of ways is just an earlier notification process. So it's usually not binding. There are some schools out there that have selective early action, which means that you can only apply to their particular school early action, but you're not binded to attend. But a majority of schools, early action is non-binding and just an earlier notification process. So for us at RPI, you apply early action, you'll get your decision at the end of January, as opposed if you apply regular decision, you'll get your admissions decision beginning of March. Whether you apply early action or regular decision, in most cases, you'll have until May 1st, which is kind of the national deposit deadline, to kind of submit your enrollment deposit, kind of make that decision as far as where you want to attend. I know sometimes Division I will have different timelines as far as students committing, signing letters of intent, those sort of things. But for a majority of Division III schools, kind of May 1st is that kind of enrollment deposit deadline.
Yeah, I know we used to work hard to identify and get our guys submitted for early decision when I was at Vassar, because there was, from a probability perspective, their chances of getting in at a school with such a low acceptance rate was increased pretty significantly. And there's something to be said, I think, and this kind of goes along with recruiting in a lot of ways, where if you apply early to decision, you're telling that school that's where I want to be.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's something that you guys consider, like you're actively thinking about that during the process, but I know from a coach's perspective, it made you feel comfortable about a kid because you knew that, like, all right, this is where he really wants to be. But we definitely pushed the early decision at the Division III level for exactly the reasons that you spoke about. There was some financial incentive. You were more likely to get that full package because more money is available to kids who, at least how it worked at Vassar, And then just the other piece that you got a better chance of getting in. And when you get to some of these high academic schools, you want to stack the chips in your favor the best you can, whether you have athletic support or not. That early decision route oftentimes can be the best route to go if that's the place that you want to go to school. That's the place that you want to go play baseball at. Is get that application in early decision, and don't let yourself go into a larger and potentially more competitive pool.
Yeah, I mean, we want people who want to be at our school. By applying early decision, you're indicating that. So that kind of sets you up for success, sets you up for being happy at the school, building affinity with the school, and then down the road, hopefully being a happy alum, and donating some money back to the institution that you attended. So I think it kind of rolls from early decision all the way to post graduation.
From an application perspective, we get this question quite a bit too. Like, obviously, there's multiple layers to it, and different schools have different supplements. But the thing that I seem to get a bunch of questions around is the essay, and the importance of that. I've had certain families say, "Well, do we even need to write one because the coach is supporting them?" Yes, you still have to go through the application process, and I think what I'm hoping you're going to say is, don't mail it in if you're getting recruited. And that's unfortunately, we've had to have that conversation a few times. They're like, hey, you still need to put a really strong foot forward with your application. Just because that coach likes you and they told you, hey, like, you're going to get in, don't mail it in terms of the quality of the application that you're putting forward. And if you want to talk a little bit about kind of the essay or some of the other pieces of the application outside of the actual transcript.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of schools, or I should say, there are some schools, universities out there who give points to different aspects of the application. So they'll give points to your GPA, they'll give you points to your strength of your curriculum, how the courses, the level of courses that you're taking. They'll give you points to your extracurricular activities. Did you not only participate in baseball, but maybe you were captain of the baseball team, or you were member of the robotics team or captain or had a full-time job or took care of a grandparent, but just kind of giving you points for your kind of extracurricular, your leadership skills that you've demonstrated. And then they also might give you points for your personal statement or essay. In a lot of those schools, you had to get to a minimum kind of point value in order for you to be admitted to that institution. So if you're mailing in your essay, you're getting 0 points on that section, or maybe 1 point or 2 points instead of the 5 or 6 that you could get. That could really impact your kind of overall score and your overall qualifications for getting admitted to that school. But we're looking in the essay really for students who are kind of letting us know what makes them tick, how they'll contribute to our institution for the 4 or 5 years that they're going to be there, and then the 40, 50, 60 years that they're going to be alum of that institution. So a lot of times it's hard to get kind of information about a student, the kind of color behind their transcript, their extracurricular activities. So we're just looking for students who are kind of sharing that information with them. There's also other things. Certain majors might have a portfolio requirement. So if you're going into architecture or music or the arts, or video game design, there might be some sort of portfolio that's required. And to get admitted academically, you have to meet the school standards. But also portfolio-wise, you also have to meet the school standards. So if you brush off the portfolio, don't submit good pieces, and you get 20 out of 100 on that portfolio, the admissions office's hands are kind of tied. And even if you are a top-level recruit, you might not be getting the happy letter or the happy notification online because you haven't kind of met the standards of that kind of particular major. Some schools, they really place an emphasis on interviewing with the college. So whether it's an in-person interview with an admissions staff member or a Zoom interview with an admissions staff member, or some schools will use alums around the United States, around the world to kind of conduct those interviews. They're viewed importantly. Some of them really add to the student's application portfolio. On the flip side, if you decide not to do one, that's kind of speaking kind of volumes about how serious you might be about that particular institution, your affinity for that institution. So it can really be a negative. So if an interview is offered, even if it's optional, I really would encourage students to partake in accept that interview, conduct that interview. Great opportunity to learn a little bit more about the university, about the college from someone else, whether it's a mission staff member or an alumni. Sometimes I feel like recruit athletes solely kind of interact with the coach or solely interact with the team members that they're kind of entering the program with. But on a daily basis, whether it's in the dining hall, their roommate, the residence hall, their professors or classmates, you're going to be interacting with the university as a whole. You're not just be locked in with your team and with your coach. So as much information you can gather about the university to make sure it's kind of the right fit for you, the better it kind of is. I guess in a fortunate way in the United States, the college system, university system, every college is different. There's some college university systems overseas where you take a test, you get a score, and they tell you which colleges you can kind of attend based upon your score in that particular exam. Here it's nice because you do have more options, but with those more options, it's a little bit more work kind of researching what's required, what they look for during that kind of application process, because one university, one school within the university, one major within the university might have totally different kind of admissions requirements. There's some schools out there with hundreds of majors, and each of those hundreds of majors have different GPA requirements, different class requirements, different interview portfolio requirements. So you kind of do have to do that groundwork to make sure that you kind of check all those boxes during the process.
No, that's a great answer. I mean, I think it should go without saying, put your best foot forward.
Yeah.
But I think it's important for people to understand that even if you are being supported by a college coach, mailing in, I say mailing in from the perspective of not doing your best effort, you're starting off on the wrong foot, even if you do get in. And the last thing you want is for that to get back to, because I'm assuming that a lot of times people will be like, hey, he's getting in, but just a heads up, got to really do his application the right way or whatever it might be. You just don't want to start off with a bad foot, and you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you leave that to question. So parents and players who are out there, whether you're going to play in the SEC or you're going to go play in the Liberty League, get your application done correctly. Make sure you put your best foot forward with it. Don't leave anything to question, because the coaches only have so much say or even communication. And at the Division III level, it's far less than it is at the Division I level in terms of the ability to kind of move the needle from an admissions perspective. And I mean, for us at Vassar, when I was there, we had no say. We had the ability to communicate. We had the ability to understand. But at the end of the day, if they came back and said, hey, this kid's not going to get in, we couldn't be like, oh, well, he's our best recruit. It's, well, you know what? He's not good enough to get into school here. So don't leave that to question. If you get the opportunity to apply to a high academic school, make sure that you put your best foot forward. Kind of to dovetail on that, obviously the application goes in prior to the student actually graduating. Often get questions around the rigor for a senior year, what those fall semester classes and grades look like.
Mm-hmm.
How do you guys delve into that to make sure that somebody's not slipping in terms of what they're doing and that they're keeping up the standard that they had previously set the first 3 years of school?
Yeah, I mean, at place at RPI, every single applicant, we require some sort of senior year grade submitted by the student's high school. It varies a little bit depending whether you're applying early decision or early action or regular decision, just because of the timeline. But even early decision students, we require at least their first quarter grades from their senior year. And we're looking at the courses that they're selecting that's factoring into the strength of curriculum. A lot of students coming are taking required courses during their senior year. So I mentioned before, RPI requires every student to have at least pre-calculus on the math side of things. There's a lot of students who are taking pre-calculus or calculus during their senior year, or a physics course during their senior year. That's kind of a required for admissions. So we want to make sure that that student is staying successful during their senior year. Every year we have students who apply early decision, have really poor performances their first quarter of their senior year for a variety of reasons, senioritis. Maybe it's more serious because they were ill or had a sick family member or something like that. But we'll defer those early decision students to the regular decision pool so that we can get some further grades from them during their senior year. So you might apply early decision, hoping to kind of lock that in. But if all of a sudden you're having 60s and 70s in your classes, we're going to say we want to make sure that you can kind of get back on track during your senior year. So taking senior year off, not a good idea. And then even at the end of the cycle, you've been accepted, you're committed to attend an institution. We all require a final transcript from your high school, and we do review those senior year grades. So has it happened where students failed some courses or didn't meet their high school graduation requirements, and we had to rescind their admissions decision? Didn't happen often, but during my 20 years, it has happened at RPI and other colleagues that I know, just because students totally took senior year off, started not maybe going to classes or not taking it as seriously as they should. Sometimes probably less prevalent with student athletes just because they want to stay obviously academically eligible to play. But some of the fall sport athletes might take the kind of spring off in high school. But we do review that all the way down until they graduate high school and kind of make sure that they kind of meet those requirements. So staying with a strong course load and good grades during that senior year is important as well.
Yeah, listen up, everybody. That's important. And I don't think that's not communicated very often in the process, that the evaluation period goes beyond the application and that you need to hold up your end of the bargain. So that's really good food for thought for people who are going through this. Even if you're, the family member listening now and your son's a senior in high school and they've already committed somewhere, strive to be the best student you can be, regardless of whether you've been admitted or not, because while those cases might be few and far between, you certainly don't want to be one of them. From a test perspective, pandemic obviously changed some stuff. Seems to be somewhat of a temporary change. It seems like a lot of schools are going back to accepting or at least evaluating the different test scores. How much does that weigh in? And then the other question I would have on that is, do you have any tips around timing for the first test? Maybe the number of tries that you seem to see that might be successful for students to kind of achieve their top test score, and any thoughts you have on general test taking topic?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, kind of COVID changed the whole standardized testing world. I never thought I would see a day where RPI would be test optional. But because of COVID, we have become test optional. Really up until today, we're kind of making decisions about as we go forward. But as you stated, a lot more schools are going back to requiring standardized testing, either SATs or ACTs. I would say it's kind of a piece of the puzzle. We always kind of say the most emphasis is placed on a student's transcript, their kind of 4-year performance in different subject areas, rather than kind of a test date that happens one time or 2 times during their junior year, 1 or 2 times during their senior year. So we'll get a lot of feedback. Oh, I'm not a good test taker. My testing is a little bit lower. But unfortunately, when you get to college, there are going to be tests. And sometimes in college classes, your whole semester grade is based upon 1 or 2 tests. So we do need to make sure that students kind of meet those standards. Some schools will have cutoffs in terms of kind of minimum SAT scores that they look for, whether they're a recruited athlete or a recruited athlete. So it's really important, if you are applying to schools where testing is required, to kind of take that testing seriously, prepare for those tests. and kind of do as best as you can. I always encourage students to take the test at least once, kind of their junior year. Maybe second half of junior year, beginning of second half of junior year, maybe another time at the end of their junior year as well. And then if you're not happy with your test scores, you can always take it kind of once during your senior year as well. There are many schools out there who will super score SATs. So they'll take test scores from the two different sections on different test dates and add those together for kind of your kind of super score. So if you did better in one section, better in the math on another date, they'll kind of combine those as well. So I think the initial test, beginning or middle of your junior year, kind of a good foundation, kind of experience it, see how you do. And then if you get your test results back and maybe particular sections, particular areas didn't go as well for you, you can kind of really focus in and hone in those areas, put more kind of study time in those areas as well. Also, the SAT and the ACT are very different in terms of the way they're given, in terms of the subject areas within the SAT or their ACT. So I know there's some students who perform better on one or the other. So if you take the SAT, maybe you didn't perform as best as you thought you could. If you have the opportunity to maybe try out the ACT, take that test as well. You can kind of maybe kind of improve yourself that way as well. So a lot of schools will ask for all of your test scores. Some schools will just ask for your best test scores. So it's really trying to kind of put your best foot forward with the testing as well.
Do you see any trends as far as what types of students excel on the ACT or the SAT from a STEM perspective, or somebody who might lean more towards the humanities and the arts? Have you seen any trends over the years in terms of which test somebody can perform a little bit better on, or?
I think it's more of kind of personal kind of way. ACT has more different sections. So they have a science section, a math section, English section. So there's more kind of a little bit diversity within the ACT. The questions are kind of asked a little bit differently as opposed to the SAT, where there's just those two sections, the kind of old kind of reading and writing section, the math section. So I wouldn't say a majority of our students are taking the SAT. Excuse me. But I wouldn't say there's a big trend in the type of student taking them.
Got it.
When it comes to, I'll circle back to this because I think this is something that we encountered a little bit more when we were at RPI than I did anywhere else. But I think it's important too is you can also strengthen your transcript with college courses at local community colleges. And I think sometimes, in the high academic world, you have kids that are maxed out kind of at their high school. Yeah. And what more can they do to kind of show that they are challenging themselves academically in order to stay competitive in the admissions process. And I think sometimes too, there are schools out there, Andy and I have run into this. I think one of our guys who ended up at Middlebury, his high school didn't even offer a lot of APs. There was 2 APs that they offered, and he took both of them. But, I think one thing that people can do, and I think that there's a caveat to it, is if you can afford it financially, to be able to go to a community college or a local college and be able to enroll in a course that would strengthen your transcript. And I think that that's something that sometimes people don't necessarily think is an option for them to be able to do in high school, let alone to strengthen their transcript.
Yeah, definitely. I think that when students talk about taking college classes in the high school, there's different types of those classes, right? Sometimes classes are offered right in the high school. They're taught by high school teachers, but they're affiliated through a local community college, or they're affiliated through another university. So you're taking a high school course taught by a high school teacher, but you can actually get some credit. It's usually a couple $100s, and you can kind of get that transcript. But on your point, whereas a high school doesn't offer those opportunities, whether you're a small school or maybe just a school with a certain educational philosophy, there's more and more options. Local community colleges you can go to and take those classes in person. There's a ton of online options these days through local community colleges. Some states will have consortiums of kind of community colleges, courses that are offered, or online networks where students can kind of take those courses. So it not only strengthens your kind of strength of curriculum during the application review, but a lot of times you can kind of transfer those credits to the institution that you're going to. So even at a place like RPI, incoming freshmen can bring up to 32 credits with them of academic coursework. So that's through AP examinations, that's through IB examinations, that's through those college in the classroom type courses that are offered at some high schools. That's through dual enrollment or taking classes at a local community college. So that can certainly not only kind of help you get in the front door of that college, but also can help you down the road to maybe lighten your load a little bit during the semester where you're in season. Maybe you don't have to take 16, 18 credits during baseball season. Maybe you can only take 12 or 13 or 14 credits because you have some of those credits kind of banked away. If you're thinking about doing a double major, you're thinking about having a minor, or maybe down the road you're thinking about going to graduate school and getting a master's degree, maybe you can stay for that extra time at that school and kind of get that graduate degree as well. So I think it's really twofold benefit. One is the benefit of putting the best foot forward, strengthening your curriculum to get admitted, but then also helping you while you're at college to maybe get some credit for those required courses or their electives, so we can kind of lighten the load a little bit. There are some colleges out there, high-end institutions, that don't accept AP credit or don't accept college credit from community colleges. So you do have to do a little bit of research there. But I think more and more colleges are being a little bit more kind of transfer friendly as far as those credits are concerned. And kind of pigtailing off the transfer world, one of my roles at RPI is also the director of transfer admissions. So I work with a lot of students who are not only transferring from other four-year schools for a variety of reasons, whether it's athletics, whether it's they were an English major, now want to become an engineer, they're homesick, whatever the case might be. But also I deal with a lot of students who are coming from community colleges, two-year institutions, and transferring to a four-year institution. And I think over my 15 or so years that I've been doing the kind of transfer world, there's more and more high-end four-year institutions that are very open, recruiting, looking for students who are coming from community colleges, transferring to their institutions. It seems like, and you guys can talk more about this, it seems like more and more community colleges are really building up strong athletic programs. So it's a great option for those students who maybe started out a little slow in high school or didn't know what they want to do down the road. We accept students from every accredited community college throughout the United States. We recruit them. We enjoy having them. So it's also kind of a great option for students to consider as well, both academically and also athletically.
Sorry, I know you listen to the podcast because you plugged the JUCO route. No, I think it's important for people to know that, and I've said it on here before, like, you know, some of our best players that we had, I mean, Austin Lawrence was a captain for us at RPI when I was there. He graduated the first year in 19, my first year I was the head coach. But he was a Hudson Valley kid. Mm-hmm. And Charles Parslow was a Hudson Valley kid. And like, we've had a lot of success with, obviously, because it's a very close, Hudson Valley, for those of you who are not from the 518, is about a mile and a half as the crow flies from campus at RPI. So, but it was a great option for those guys because we recruited them out of high school, and it was like, they had the grades to get in, but it was like, we can't afford 4 years of going to RPI, or potentially 5, because both of them ended up getting their masters in the co-term program. So it was like, I can't do this for 4 or 5 years, but I could definitely do it for 2. And if I have to, like, we'll see what happens at 3. And, both of them ended up with, phenomenal jobs. Parslow was working with NASA when he was at campus. his fifth year with Greg Echeverria. So, the idea that going to a community college and then not being able to get into a higher end academic institution, and like at the end of the day, when you graduate, it doesn't say like RPI or Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute with like an asterisk that says like your first 2 years, like, no, you graduated from RPI. And I think that it's an option that a lot of people kind of, for lack of a better term, look down their nose at because they kind of view it as like 13th grade or 14th grade when, the reality is it's a really good option for people, like you said, who maybe didn't have a great start from an academic standpoint in high school, or like you don't really know what you want to do. And, maybe you want to be an engineer, or maybe I want to be an English teacher, or whatever it might be. And it's a great option for people to be able to go do. And if it's an athletic standpoint too, it's a great option for people to go down that route. But I'm glad you mentioned that, and I'm glad you actually took one of my questions because I was going to delve into the transfer stuff a little bit. But I'm glad you brought it up. The last thing I want to kind of just touch on a little bit before we wrap up here, I don't want to take too much of your time. But I think one of the things too that the school profile that comes with the transcript and the everything else that the guidance counselor is going to send. If we could just speak a tad bit to that about how that kind of sets the curriculum, like it gives you more insight into what the type of curriculum it is that kids are going through at those schools. And I kind of just wanted to touch on it because you did, like, we were talking about the what were we just talking about? My mind is not well.
Taking community college courses, things.
Well, yeah, but the whatever we were talking about before that, you were talking about how like we can get a little bit more information from the schools on what the APs, the IBs, all those credits, right? Like what they offer, what they don't offer. Like you can discern a little bit more information of like, okay, like this kid has like maybe they don't have the financial capabilities to be able to go take a bunch of college courses, but they offer no APs, and this kid does have a 4.0 average. Like he's doing the absolute best that he can given the situation he's in versus, and I think it like, if you could speak that, I feel like it gleans a little bit more information into the process of like, okay, this kid, yeah, he has a 4.0, but they don't offer anything. And maybe they don't have the opportunity to go do this other stuff. Whereas student B has the opportunity to take every AP under the sun and take 0 and has a 93. Yeah. Like maybe that's a little bit, that moves the needle a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, during the application process, most high schools will send us what they call a school profile. Most school profiles are on the high school guidance office's website, or if you can go to your high school guidance counselor and ask if you want to see what the school profile looks like. They're a little bit different depending on the different schools, but overall, it's kind of a listing of what courses are offered at that particular high school. Some of the profiles delve in a little bit deeper and actually give a breakdown in how many A's, B's, C's, D's, F's are given in the particular subject areas. Has information like what schools students have attended, average SAT scores, ACT scores from the students who are graduating from that particular high school. I always say we like students who challenge themselves, but we're not going to punish anyone for kind of having. I'm not going to punish anyone who doesn't have the opportunities to kind of challenge themselves as other schools that. So there's a lot of schools with 20 AP courses that are offered, and there's a lot of schools with 0 AP courses that are offered. If you're looking to get into engineering and you have the opportunity to take AP calculus or a calculus course your senior year, and you decide not to take it, little red flag goes up in that because you did have the opportunity to take that course and you decided not to. But if on the flip side, if we're reviewing a student who didn't take calculus because their school didn't offer it, there's not going to be that red flag because we're not expecting someone to go out to that community college or kind of spend additional money to kind of take that particular course. So we're really looking for students who are challenging themselves in the environment that they're attending high school. So in addition to the school profile, a lot of admissions offices are broken down geographically. So each of the admissions counselors at RPI have a different geographic territory that they represent. They travel to those areas. They make connections with the high schools and their guidance counselors. I have a small kind of travel territory of the Mid-Hudson Valley of New York. So I've been to most of the high schools in my territory over the last year or last 2 years. I know the folks, I know what courses are offered there. So again, it's really about students taking advantage of the opportunities that were presented to them. We don't penalize someone for not taking the calculus course if it's not offered at their high school. We might kind of have a little, like I said, red flag go up if they're interested in science or engineering and they're not taking the calculus course that's offered at their high school their senior year.
Yeah, I wanted to hit on it just because I think that it gives people a little bit more of an idea that it's not a completely blind process as to why you're making certain decisions. Like, they know that you had the opportunity to take some of these courses and you chose not to, and that could ultimately be one of the reasons as to why, amongst other things, that you might not get into that school. And I think sometimes people just think like, well, my transcript looks like this and I have this test score, like, why can't I get in? And there are other things that go into it. Like, we've talked the essay and your extracurriculars and those things, but like, you have the information in front of you telling you like, well, your school offers 50 APs and you've taken 0. So like, maybe that, like, while other students chose to go and take those courses, that could be a differentiating factor for you to not potentially be admitted into that school.
Yeah, and that information is also a lot of times reflected in guidance counselor letters of recommendation. The Common Application has secondary school reports and other letters of recommendation reports where either teachers or guidance counselors kind of check off whether students kind of challenging themselves academically as compared to those other students who are at that particular high school. So kind of judging everyone kind of within their own basket before we kind of look at kind of comparing baskets from different schools or different parts of the United States or even different parts of the world.
Yeah, good stuff. All right. Like I said before, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but last thing, we generally end with what advice would you give people going through the recruiting process? But I'm going to flip it a little bit and say, what advice would you give people who are, to put themselves in the best position academically to be admitted to college? What should they be doing?
I mean, I don't think know if there's one answer for every single student out there. People have obviously kind of different goals, but I think it is helpful if you can kind of really sit down and be truthful with yourself as far as kind of what type of institution you're kind of looking for, what you're hopefully looking for academically, what you're looking for in the particular school that you're going to. While solely kind of looking at schools for athletic purposes, baseball purposes is great. You want to continue your athletic career. There's a lot outside of baseball that colleges, universities have to offer. So kind of taking advantage of those opportunities and finding a place that you'll fit into, not only with the baseball team and the baseball family, but also within the larger community and larger family within the academic institutions environment. So I think it's not only important to kind of look at how you're going to be happy or how you can be most happy athletically, but also how you can be kind of most happy overall as a person at the institution that you're going to spend 4 or 5 years at. And then also hopefully making some friends that'll be lifelong friends and going back to the institution for homecoming or baseball games or whatever the case might be. So sometimes I feel like students are so hyper focused on one area. It could be athletics, it could be music, it could be robotics. They only look at those kind of little particular kind of pinholes when they are doing that kind of search, but really looking at the kind of whole university as a whole, the location, the atmosphere, the campus community that you're going to become a member of after you graduate high school. So I don't really think that answered your question, but that's the advice I'll provide.
No, you did. I think you hit on something that, from an admission standpoint and the academic side of things, that as coaches and when we work with people that we want to talk about, like in finding the right fit, it's not just solely the baseball program. It's like you want to make sure that when you go to that school, you feel as though you're going to be supported and can thrive there, not only athletically, but academically, socially, emotionally, everything that you could possibly imagine, because you're right. You're going to be there for 4 or 5 years. And, we have a good friend of ours, and I stole this from him years ago, and he stole it from someone else who I couldn't even tell you. But like, if you're not happy standing in the center of campus, you're not going to be happy standing on the pitcher's mound or at shortstop or in center, because it is a very large part of your college experience is going to that school and being in the fabric of that community. And I think, you're so right that like people get so hyper focused, and specifically for us, it's baseball, but they get so hyper focused on one thing, and then they get to the school and it's like, well, I like baseball, but everything else about this place, I don't fit in. I don't like it. I don't feel like whatever it might be. And then their experience for a year or 2 years is awful. When if you take all of that stuff into consideration on the front end, you can likely find yourself at the right place where you're going to be able to really thrive. And that's ultimately what everybody wants, whether it's on the admission side, the academic side, or the athletic side. Like, you want kids that want to be there. They're going to thrive academically. They're going to thrive athletically, or whatever else it is that they do. And, you're right. Like, you want to find lifelong friends. I mean, I played baseball with Andy at Marist. Everyone knows this. Like, we now co-own a business together and do this every week. We didn't do that. We wouldn't be doing this if we didn't become friends 20 plus years ago. Mm-hmm. And, I think there's so much truth to that. And it's hard to imagine, I think, when you're 17, 18 years old going through it. But you do want to kind of have that full picture of what is this that I'm getting myself into, and what am I with the price of college nowadays? Like, what am I getting out of this that I'm going to be putting into this? And I think that that's something that a lot of people need to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I always encourage students when they're visiting, particularly kind of an athletic visit, to kind of break away a little bit at some point during their visit, or if they have the opportunity to visit another time, and kind of just do like a visit for a non-athlete. Sometimes the kind of recruited visits solely sport focused. You're kind of going to practice, you're going to a game, you're spending the night with the team, but you don't get to go to the student union at 10 o'clock at night and see what's kind of going on, what food options are available there, what the community's kind of general community is based like, if it's a right comfortable fit for you. So even if you're going on those kind of scheduled recruitment visits, maybe if it's 30 minutes or 45 minutes, just kind of break away, wander around campus, away from the coaches, away from the team, and kind of see the campus for itself.
Yeah, I always liked, and we have coaches who listen to this too. Like, I always liked, and I did it obviously because I worked in admissions and I knew the value of it, but I liked sending, like, I would have kids come in and I would just send them over to admissions for whether it was the morning or the afternoon info session, and I'd flip my visit however it went. But I would, like, especially if it was, someone we were really recruiting, and I know Andy's done this before, like, I would try to set up a class for them to go to sit in on whatever class it might be. Like, hey, I want to be a mechanical engineer. Like, hey man, we have 15 of them. Like, let me see if I can get you in a class with 1 or 2 of them over the course of the day too. So that, hey, for not only are you getting the experience with the players so you can ask questions and see what's going on, like, you're actually walking around campus when all of a sudden there's 6,000 people, in and out, all the buildings, going to classes. You're in class with, sometimes I'd put them in freshmen's, seminars where there's 120 people, and then an upper level engineering class where there's 15 people. And it's like, yeah, so you see the progression of like, okay, this is what it looks like my freshman year. But by the time I'm a junior or senior, I'm in a class of 15 people doing stuff that I really want to do. And all the dining options and everything that you have, and all that they come out of it. And it's like, wow, this is a place that I can, because you get that feel of what it's going to be like being a student, and you can walk away being like, yeah, I really think I could be here. And on the flip side, I had a lot of kids who, like, I shouldn't say a lot, but I had kids who come back and be like, hey, I don't know if this place is for me. Like, okay, I'd rather know now doing this than when you're in October of your freshman year when you're miserable and you don't want to be here. I would much rather know in the recruiting process here doing it during your senior, going into your senior year or junior year, whatever it might be, before, so we kind of skip all of those steps. But I think there's a lot of value in that if you're a student athlete in trying to, when you go on visits, and if it is an official or an unofficial, like, ask if you can sit in on a class and walk around campus with a student athlete without the coaches, because you can really get a sense for what that campus is like and really figure out like, yeah, this is a place I'd really want to go, or like, I don't know if this place is for me. And, you know, it's invaluable in this process, in my personal opinion.
I concur 100%. I mean, I think that those experiences, especially when you're talking about a high academic school, you want to have a feel for what you're getting into. And I think, without going too far off topic here, but the new rules that are put in place with contacts, it's opened up the door for these kids to go on official visits a lot earlier, where prior to, you know, you're having 15-year-olds commit to schools. They have no idea what it's like to be a college athlete or a college student.
They barely know what it's like to be a high school student.
Yeah. And now with the new timelines, like if you're a 2027 who's going through this process and you start to get some interest in August and September of this upcoming kind of recruiting cycle, and you have the opportunity to go do an official visit, I think it should almost be mandatory in order to make a good decision, for exactly the points that both of you brought up, is that you get a little bit of a teaser as to, oh, this is what college is like. This is what it looks like when everybody's on campus. This is what a classroom looks like. This is how you're going to navigate kind of your day-to-day life on that particular campus. You get a feel for the environment, the culture of the school. And I mean, at the end of the day, you got to do both, whether you're going to play baseball in college or not. Like you got to be a baseball player, and you also got to be a student. So if you can paint a picture of what that looks like on both sides of it, the baseball stuff's usually pretty easy to sort out. The academic piece, the social piece, it's really hard to understand what that can be like unless you get a little bit of a taste of it. And those official visits, whether it was William and Mary or Vassar, they were huge. And a lot of times we'd get kids who'd come on campus and they were like, you know, we kind of got the feeling that like they were on the fence, or like maybe they had another school that was a little bit ahead of where we are. They go and they have a really good visit, and it could change everything, because they're like, oh, wow, I didn't even know that this was how things operated on this campus. And I loved the team, the class I went to, the professor was awesome. We had a great time in the dining hall. I didn't know that, you know, there's only 3,000 kids who go here, but I didn't know that it seemed that busy, because the campus is small and it's tight and it's intimate. So like that experience can change how you think about a school. Because a lot of times I think a lot of decisions are made off of U.S. News World Report. I definitely said that wrong. Or what you do on Google and you go, oh, well, there's 1,800 kids. And it's like, oh, well, that's too small. Well, go to that campus and find out if it's actually too small, because 2,000 people in a small location can seem a lot bigger than you think. I think this is the type of stuff that is really important for kids when you get down to the nitty gritty and you're starting to make decisions. You want to get as much information as you can, and I think that visit can play a really big part in it.
Nailed it. Nick, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Please give my best to everybody in that office who, whether I know them or not, you know, the Karen and Ariana and Jeannie and Lisa and whoever else is there that I might know. They're the best. I wouldn't be where I am without. I've said it on here before. I wouldn't be able to do this and stuff without actually, you know, having Karen tell me to stop moving and moving my hands and stuff as I talk. So a lot more confident with what I do now after giving 7 years of info sessions. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. I think this was we talked about before. We didn't really know where this is going to go, but I think that we nailed what it is that we ultimately wanted out of this, and I couldn't thank you enough. So thank you. And I'm a huge Irish fan. And Nick, for those of you who don't know, graduated from Notre Dame. So we're going to go Irish on Thursday night.
Yes, definitely go Irish. It's been my pleasure. As I said, I listened to your podcast. I have two high school kids who play baseball. So just learning about the ins and outs of recruiting through you guys has been invaluable. Great listen. And I hope I was able to share and add some value to this podcast episode. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Nick. Really appreciate it. And while I'm not an Irish fan, I'll hop on the train for this one and go Irish.
Appreciate it.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thank you for listening this week. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and smash that like button for us. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at EMD Baseball. If you want to find out what me and Keith do to help families and players navigate the recruiting process, go ahead and check us out on emdbaseball.com. Take a few minutes to check out our new online academy. I promise you'll get some good information out of that. Thanks again for listening. Check in with you next week.